Good evening and overnight. Welcome back to more from day one. As always, well, I was going to say hit the mailbag, but it doesn't look like we've had anything arrive. So, in the meantime, we will start tonight's Midnight in the Desert with David Jacobs from September 24th, 2015. All about alien abductions and unidentified flying objects. So without further ado, from the Kingdom of Nye in the Great American Southwest, here's Art Bell.
From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever the case may be, wherever you are. All the time zones around the world covered like a blanket by this program, Midnight in the Desert. I'm Art Bell. And there are only two rules for this radio program. No bad language, don't need it, and only one call per show. Other than that, no rules. I would like to officially welcome KFRH Radio, 100 kilowatts in Las Vegas at 104.3. Now, 100 kilowatts on a 9,000-foot mountain, let me tell you, really goes and goes and goes. It covers parts of 4 states. And also KBET, their sister, 790 AM in Las Vegas. Now, let me tell you a story, all right? It's a story of internet woes. And a guy who worries way too much. That would be me. Last night, beginning at 8:36 p.m. Now, at 8:36 p.m., I come over here about 8 o'clock. And it's here in my guest house. That's where I've got the studio, by the way. And I start getting ready for the program. You know, I look around at what's new, what's going on. And it was at 8:36 p.m. the internet died. Now, I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to encourage any trouble, but they came, the internet company, at about 5 o'clock this afternoon, and of course there was no internet in here at all, so they went out to a box that is located outside somewhere, and they found a wire ripped off and shorted to another wire. Now, I'm not saying somebody yanked on it, but it's entirely possible. And so they put it back, but there's something else going on. So if I begin to sound blippy or unusual to you, that will mean it's not completely fixed. So, yeah, I mean, somebody could have yanked on it, or I suppose, it's only a few months old, I suppose, you know, the warming sun and the cooling could have done something, but it wasn't exactly like that. So at 8:36, I realized, guess what? I don't have any internet. Well, I use internet for my phones to get the signal from here to there and then to you. I mean, it's all internet, right? And then, of course, the computers, Skype, whatever, it's all internet. Every last little bit of it, we are in that age, the internet age. So last night was, you know, I want to say beyond miserable for me, if you can imagine. My daughter, poor Asia, has hand, mouth, and foot virus. It's like an outbreak in her school. And the 2 little girls next door also are down with it, and it is miserable for a child, and I guess really horrible for an adult, so I'm trying really hard not to get it. But I mean, last night was just bad, because here I was off the air, which I don't like being. I wanted to be here, of course. And so I was miserable about being off the air and wondering what the heck happened. And then on top of that, poor Asia's down. I'm feeling really poorly about her. My wife is the main caregiver for Asia right now, so that I don't get this. Rarely do adults get it, but they can. So, no kisses and hugs in the house. Let's see. Off the air, wire yanked. No kisses, no hugs. But I'm up anyway because my body clock says, Art, you will be on the air And you will do the program between 9 and midnight, and then you will probably not go to sleep for 3 or 4 hours after that. So it was a miserable night last night, and I hope it's fixed, but, with the internet, who knows? Now, the good news is, and I was going to come on last night, and I was going to joke. I was going to joke with you, and I was going to say, sadly, this may be my last program. Because here in this time zone, we've still got 2 hours to be hit by the asteroid the internet predicted, right? Told you it was ridiculous, but they predicted it. And guess what? I have heard that since we did not get wiped out last night, these guys on the internet and gals have moved the date to the 28th. So Earth is not going to be now smashed until the 28th. They have to keep setting new dates. Okay, so what else is new? The Pope plunged into the middle of New York. And boy, that is a melting pot in New York, isn't it? And I worried every second. I don't know about you, but the Pope in New York, the Pope even in Washington, bad enough, but in New York, among those crowds, it's just scary, and I worried for him every moment. A duck boat tour vehicle and a charter bus carrying foreign students to a college orientation event collided on a busy Seattle bridge on Thursday. 4 people dead, dozens went to the hospital. Bad, just awful. President of Mexico told families of 43 students who disappeared a year ago, you know about this, right? In southern Mexico during a meeting on Thursday, that he would create a special new prosecutor and try to find out what has happened to all of these children. And now this. I think I have found something on Mars before Richard. Could that possibly be true? Well, all right. Probably not. Probably he knows. And I'm just on the air first. If not, then I want you to know. I want you to go to artbell.com because on Mars right now, somebody actually has found what looks like Stonehenge on Mars. I wouldn't kid you, and I wouldn't put it up if it didn't look spectacular and I should use words like torsion field and physics, and there is a kind of physics too, concentric circles. Look at these rocks. This is virtually Stonehenge on Mars. So if you want to see it for yourself, it's at artbell.com. I'm sure Richard will be all over this when he gets to air tonight. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. And I don't really see how it could be. And you take a look at the photograph and you let me know what you think. All right, so coming up next is one of my favorite people in all the world. He is Dr. Jacobs, Dr. David Jacobs, professor, actually. And the reason that I find him so fascinating is that unlike everybody else nearly in the world that I would interview, the professor does not necessarily feel that the aliens that most of us think are visiting us are good guys. You may remember this from years past. Dr. Michael Jacobs is a retired professor of history at Temple University in Philadelphia. He also has been a UFO researcher since 1966. Long time, right? In 73, he completed his doctoral dissertation in the field of intellectual history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison on the controversy over unidentified flying objects in America. This was only the second PhD degree granted with a dissertation involving a UFO-related theme, so it's very rare. He has written and delivered many articles, papers, and addresses on the subject of UFOs and abductions. He's been a consultant to the major UFO organizations. From 1977 to 2011, he taught the country's only regular curriculum university course on UFOs and abductions. UFOs in American Society. Pretty cool title, huh? UFOs and American Society. Since the early 1980s, he has specialized in the UFO abduction phenomenon. He has investigated, in fact, over 1,150 abductions with 150 different individuals. So coming up in a moment, Dr. David Jacobs. And we're going to hope the ones and zeros stay in place tonight. I'm Art Bell.
I was starting to wonder then, Mr. Bell, because say the breakup of the deal is not because of us or the original master that I have. It is actually how the show aired that particular night. Again, we're quiet during the muted music. As soon as they return, we will return as well. Meanwhile, in the foundry we go.
Your conductor, Art Bell, will punch your ticket when you call 1-952-CALL-ART. That's 1-952-225-5278.
Well, all right, everybody. We're monitoring the situation with the Internet, and it may or may not be okay. So, having said that, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Jacobs. Professor Jacobs, welcome to the program, Professor.
Thank you, Art. I appreciate it.
Good to have you. And the reason I have always... How long has it been since we talked, anyway?
Oh, hours and hours ago.
Yeah, more like a decade or something.
Something like that,
yeah. Long time, yeah.
Hours.
And the reason that I have always enjoyed you so much is because I have always said that these things, these creatures, these entities, whatever they are, coming to Earth, are, in my opinion, not at all necessarily our friends. And I know that you have, in fact, written a book on that subject, and that you probably agree with that. And you're about the only one, frankly. Everybody else thinks it's kumbaya time, and they come down to advise us every now and then on our poor ecological maintenance of the planet.
Yeah, to me, it's just, well, it's unfortunate. I just never get that. I never have gotten it. And even Bud Hopkins didn't get that. He might have gotten it a couple of times, but the majority of the times he never got that. And it's all a matter of the agenda that one has going into the session. It's all a matter of the questions that are asked, and the ability for the person who's doing the questioning to analyze what those questions mean, as opposed to just accepting them at face value. And it's really, it's a struggle for me, because I come across this all the time, and I just know it doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. It makes no sense in terms of what people tell me.
Well, I don't know how many legitimate cases of abduction and messaging do you think there have been? I interviewed Travis Walton not long ago. That's a very well witnessed case.
Oh yeah, good case.
A good case, but he doesn't remember much. They didn't have much of a message for him. How many?
The problem is, he only remembered about 20 minutes of a 5-day event, and he didn't undergo hypnosis to find out really what happened.
That's right. So, how many cases have you studied, Doctor, in which, there has been a substantial message given and that you feel the case is pretty good?
None. There's no such thing as a message, in my opinion. People don't come from a trillion zillion miles away to give somebody a message that they will immediately forget, because that's what the abduction phenomenon is all about. Logically, see, the message concept came from the contactees of the 1950s, who basically were charlatans. The major ones, George Adamski and Truman Bethroom, and people who the audience probably never heard of. But they were all the rage in the 1950s, and they got on flying saucers, and they took trips to various planets. One guy, Howard Menger, took a trip to the moon. He got out on the moon's surface. The air was just like the air you and I breathe. He had dinner with the king of the moon, you know. And other ones go to Venus, and it's wonderful. It's great. It's a paradise on Venus. Sort of forgetting to talk about the fact that it's 800 degrees on Venus. There's, you know, these, and they were always left with a message. And the message was, you know, we come in peace, it's great, and we all have to get together and stop atomic bombs and kill communists.
Now, that might be one area where you're making a point that needs to be contested. We did have UFOs over missile silos, and they actually turned off the ability to launch. That's pretty good evidence of that. And then the Russians had a very similar incident. And other than that, you're right. But I mean, those two are standouts.
Yeah, but those aren't necessarily messages. We don't know what happened there. It could be that their very presence in some way screwed up the electronics, like car stoppages, which for UFO sighters is just, you know, there's been thousands of those. People say that their car will slow down and stop, and after when they see one of UFOs in its proximity.
Yeah, but they weren't hovering over high emission Volkswagen factories. They were hovering over ICBMs.
Right. But still, we can extrapolate that as a message because but there's still so many other things it could be that the message just fits into one of many. For the messages of today, generally speaking, the messages that people have, I've read about, you know, that they're personal messages to the person that deals with the problems of the earth, ecology,
yes,
and
right.
climate and things like that, all sort of current stuff. And it's not a concept in the UFO abduction phenomena. It's nonsensical. You have to understand that the abduction phenomenon begins in infancy and goes with great frequency all the way into old age. It stops somewhere in old age. We're not sure when, but so people have hundreds and hundreds, and I know that sounds crazy, hundreds of abduction events. Almost all abductees have that number of abduction events. And the concept of the message just is not there. The setup is not for a message. The people are not special to be able to carry forth a message. Now, you do get people who say they have messages. A lot of these people, I'm not going to name any names, but let's just say I'm extremely dubious of their account.
Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit and actually ask you, I think, if you believe that these people who claim they were abducted, in at least some cases, actually were.
Oh, people who claim they were abducted actually were?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yes. You have to remember that the people I see fill out a questionnaire for me, talk to me for a couple of hours, and have all sorts of other contacting and messaging, so to speak, with me before I let them into my office. So I know by the time they walk into my office, I know for the most part, there's a couple of exceptions in my life, but for the most part, I know that these people are serious people who might be psychiatrists, psychologists, university professors, PhDs, MDs, LLDs, or people who dropped out of school in the 12th grade, and everybody in between. But it doesn't matter because they all say the same thing. They all have the same experiences. It's all been going on all their lives, and generally speaking, their mother or their father was an abductee beforehand, and their grandmother or grandfather on one side or the other was an abductee. And so this is a phenomenon that goes back probably to the latter part of the 19th century. We can date it back with a degree of certainty to 1917, and with a lot of certainty to the 1920s. But when you have a person who's abducted 400 times, which sounds insane,
It does.
but is actually not unusual at all, they're not going to give this person a message. They got other things that this person has been doing for them all their lives.
All right, but let's stop there. So you do believe, certainly, in the abduction phenomenon. No question about that. I wanted to establish that. In almost every case, when there is a message given, as I pointed out, it's you're ruining Earth. You need to, reestablish yourself with Earth, and you need to clean things up, and the planet's going to die. And it's almost always that, isn't it?
That's au courant. That's new stuff. They didn't say that in the 40s and 50s.
Well, we didn't think about things like that in the 40s and 50s.
No, they thought about nuclear war in those days.
That's right. That's
most of the messages that the charlatans came forward with were nuclear stuff and communism and all that sort of stuff. It's culture dependent. Here's the situation. A person is first abducted, let's just say in childhood, or maybe even in infancy. They're abducted not once. They're abducted, let's just say 5 times a year. I have never, ever worked with a person who is only abducted 5 times a year. That is a fantasy. But let's just say that it's 5 times a year. Most abductees will give their right arm for 5 times a year only. Now they're 40 years old. That's 200 abductions.
That's right.
If it's 10 times a year, which is ridiculously small number of abductions from what people tell me, it goes on over and over and over again. That's 400. Having 400 abductions a year means nothing to me. It's standard stuff. Same thing with abductees who are real abductees. They know they've been abducted throughout the course of their lives. They only may remember maybe 20 events or maybe 30. And I have one woman who I worked with on a daily basis almost, who we talked about 100 different events that had happened to her, but she was being abducted a couple of times a week. All these people want it to stop. All these people don't like it. They want to get rid of it.
Professor, I've got to say, if I was being abducted 400 times a year, I'm not sure.
A lifetime,
in a lifetime, 400 times, I'm not sure I could maintain my sanity, which probably is in doubt when you claim abduction anyway. I'm actually not.
Again, that is his show.
They don't remember any of them. And the ones that I see or other serious researchers see are the people who have bleed-through memories and remember some events happening to them and don't know what those events were, and they want to find out. They've been thinking about it for years, and they just need to find out what happened that time when they were driving along the highway and they were in one spot, and then it was 2 hours later, and they were in the same spot. And they think about that, and they think about that, and they want to clear it out. They want to find out. Generally speaking, with the questionnaire I have on my website, they've undergone a whole lot of other things that they don't attach to abductions. But abductees answer these kinds of questions in huge percentages, and non-abductees usually just say no. And so it's a clandestine phenomenon. And when you're secretive, the first thing that you have to do to maintain secrecy is prevent the person who's being abducted from remembering it. That's why it's so difficult to do, and why you have to have hypnosis, and why more people aren't coming forward, although there's thousands and thousands and thousands who've already come forward. So getting a message and remembering the message, like I said, it makes no sense.
Well, all right. Then I'm taking it that you generally put a person under hypnosis, and that's the only way they remember what happened, right?
Sometimes people remember what happens in a single event. They don't remember other events, but they remember one thing. And they consciously remember what happened to them. Now, here's another problem. And my next book is going to be How to Do Hypnosis with Abductees, because it's a tangled mystery. when they consciously remember the events that took place during their abduction, which might have been 5 years ago, might have been last night, whatever it is, they're notoriously inaccurate. Most people think, well, if a person remembers it just straight out, it's got to be real, it's got to be accurate, they've got to know it and all that. And the answer is no, that is not what experience tells us. It's notoriously
inaccurate. But even under hypnosis, you're saying it's notoriously...
No. This is just conscious memory.
Oh, I see. Okay. And under hypnosis, how would you qualify the percentage of accuracy relayed to you?
The first session, I'd say 60% accurate, 40% not so accurate. Second session, 70-30. Third session, maybe 80-20. By the time you get to the fourth session, you're in the 90th and above percentile. As people get used to it, because the questioning that I use anyway is just straight chronological and logical.
All right, but does it become so chronological that as you go through the series of hypnotic sessions with them, they build on their own story?
No. We do a different session, a different event each session. Unless we left off in the middle of one for some reason or other, we'll continue on with that one until the end. But I try to do a different event each time. And the one that they consciously remember, which might have happened 20 years ago, for example, that's an important one for their life because they've been thinking about that for 20 years. So I don't like to do it until the fourth or fifth session when they get used to the remembering process, they get used to being relaxed and focused, and then I do that session.
All right. Hold on, Professor. Hold it right there. We'll be back.
Again, they're muted for their musical bumper. Looks like he's having trouble with his digital package. We'll see if it holds on the other side.
Darkest time between dusk and dawn. From the high desert, it's Art Bell's Midnight in the Desert. Now, here's Art.
Professor David Jacobs is my guest, and he's a very unique individual. He's the only one I know that kind of agrees with me that these are not necessarily good guys. And for a moment there, I thought that he was about to tell me that abductions don't actually happen. But that's not the case at all. In fact, he very much confirms the fact they happen again and again and again to certain individuals. So we're going to discuss the nature of them a little bit. So, Doctor, when you get these people under hypnosis, what typically, if there is a typical, what typically do you find out?
Well, basically, they all say the same thing in terms of procedures that are done to them. We used to concentrate on table procedures. They're put on a table. They are under control. They can't run. They can't scream. They can't swing. They can't kick.
Right.
They just, besides that, it's been going on all their lives, and they know the routine. Their clothes are moved in an empty room if it's a large UFO, or just if it's a small UFO, just in the one room that they have. And they're placed on a table, and sperm is taken from men, eggs are taken from women. There's a touching process, which appears to be some sort of an examination of the person's body, but the examination, in my opinion, is a neurological examination. It's looking through the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerve endings and all that, and the neurological system there, the neural system, I should say. And that's my best guess. But I've just heard hundreds and hundreds of these things, and I always wondered what they were doing, and that's my best guess.
And it usually involves sperm and eggs with the respective sexes.
We've known this since the very, very beginning of our knowledge of abductions. In the Antonio Villas-Boas case in Brazil of 1957, the guy who was abducted said that he was forced to have sexual intercourse with a human-looking female, and he couldn't control himself. He just had to do that. And then she allegedly, and I'm not sure of this, but she allegedly pointed to her body and then pointed up. And he said that he felt like he was being used as a stallion to improve their stock. And the odd thing about that sentence in 1957 was that there's a certain prescience to it. I mean, it does figure into the reproductive program that they have. Then in the next one that we heard about, which was in 1961, the Barney and Betty Hill case, they took sperm from Barney, who found it to be such an embarrassing event that when John Fuller wrote the book Interrupted Journey about their experiences, he had Fuller take it out, take that part out of the book, which was actually a gift to humanity, because nobody could then claim that other guys that said they were taking a sperm from me, they just picked it up from the Barney and Betty Hill story. They couldn't say that.
Well, if you look at, for example, Whitley Strieber, something very embarrassing happened there as well. And Whitley is such an honest, straightforward guy that he talks about it. And it's not easy for him, Dr. Jacobs. Not easy at all. He's very emotional, very about it, very upset about it. But he tells the truth, and he takes a lot of heat. A lot of heat.
Well, but for Barney Hill, the Barney Hill story was Betty and Barney made into a movie in 1975, a TV movie, and a best-selling. Of course, Whitley's book Communion was a best-selling book too.
That's right.
But before Whitley, nobody could blame it on Barney in terms of their memories were confused because they saw the TV movie or whatever it was. It just wasn't there.
I see.
And with Betty Hill, they stuck a needle in her navel, and she said that they told her that it was a pregnancy test. Now, in my estimation, that was confabulation, and they probably did not say that because it still remains a unique sentence that they had that no other abductee has ever said. However, the procedure of sticking a needle in a woman's navel is extremely common. And my best guess is, and Bud Hawkins' best guess was also at the time, is that they're angling the needle towards the ovary and just pulling out follicles from the ovary that way. So we knew that it had this reproductive aspect very, very early on, and it still has it even now, even as we speak. They're just not letting up on that. And that's important.
I think it's potentially very important because, of course, we're looking toward motive on their part, and one can imagine any number of things that they're trying to perhaps refresh their own genetic pool that might be getting somehow stale, if genetics can get stale, or they might be trying to reproduce some sort of hybrid or something, or they might be checking on us because they originally designed us.
Well, I'm going to go for number two. That's my answer. The thing is that fetuses are then, after a while, are inserted into women's uteruses and in other parts of their body there. And then they're removed after about 9 or 11 weeks when the woman begins to sort of show, or even earlier if they're put in a slightly different position. And then abductees see babies floating or fetuses floating in nutrient tanks. Then eventually they see them as babies. And they have to hold the babies, and they see them as toddlers. They have to play with the toddlers and deal with the toddlers. They see them as young children. The same thing applies there, playing with them. They see them as older children. They see them as as adolescents. They see them as young adults. They see them as adults, and they don't see them as older adults.
So
now they have to be older adults by that time themselves, obviously, but they don't describe them as like being a 70-year-old hybrid.
right.
Then there's the hybrid, and all these babies look like crosses between humans and aliens, but there is a gradation. Some look quite alien, some look quite human.
Well, that's the way it works out. I mean, if you mix a Chinese a woman and an American male, sometimes you get very Chinese-looking children. In fact, more often than not, frankly, they have very strong genes, and then sometimes more American. So that's kind of normal, right?
Well, you would think. However, in recent years, what we have seen is, in my second book on the subject called The Threat, which came out in 1998, I talked about hybrids quite a bit. And what the gray aliens would say from time to time is that soon there was going to be a change. Soon everyone was going to be happy. Soon everybody would know his place, and it was going to be wonderful. It was going to be great, and the change was coming soon. And I knew that soon in some way meant an introduction into the society by human-looking hybrids. I tried to get the abductees to tell me what soon meant. You know, did it mean 1 million years? Did it mean 5 million years? Did it mean tomorrow?
May I stop you for a moment?
Yes.
Originally you said that they're not really giving us messages.
Correct.
And yet this would appear to be a message.
Well, it's not a message telling us to do anything or that there's something about the earth.
Right.
That's what most messages are these days. They're giving them the chemical analysis, how to do a chemical analysis of some bizarre something or other, or physical or astronomical. It's just soon we're all going to be together, you know.
Okay.
And a lot of abductees have reported this. But you can't really take it as a message. It's just something that is said. But we never knew what soon meant. Well, in the book that I just published a couple of weeks ago, Walking Among Us, I think that that we're in the change now, and it started I don't know when it started, but I first started hearing accounts starting in 2003 that I had never heard before. Now, I've looked at 1,150 different incidents with people.
Right.
And most of them are pretty much the same. In fact, I sit on a chair, and there's a little day couch or day bed off my office here in my home office, and I will ask these questions and what's happening next and what do they do next, and they're talking to me and talking to me and talking to me, and I'm listening really, really hard, and I'm really hard. I'm really listening hard, and I realize I'm listening so hard I'm dreaming. I have fallen asleep. I've heard these stories hundreds of times. It's soporific. And people have asked me, are you asleep?
Mm-hmm.
And I say, oh, no, not me. Oh, not me. No. What happens next? You know, and oh, God.
All right, so it is your contention that these hybrids now walk among us.
Right. Well, the point is that soporific aspect of these of the accounts is extremely important, because everybody, no matter who they are, oh gosh, I'm going to have to. I
hear it. You're getting a phone call, right?
Okay, I don't know, unknown name and an unknown number, and I'm going to pull this thing out. It's 1 o'clock in the morning almost. Somebody's calling.
Yes.
Anyway, so you have to have that constant sense of people having the same experiences over and over and over again, no matter who they are. That's very important because it validates everybody. In 2003, I began to hear something I never heard before.
And
that's unusual. And what it was a guy who I had talked with. I had 4 sessions with him, I think it was. His name was Bernard. a friend. And this was a really good friend of his named Eric. And Eric was a great friend of his. It was his best friend. And, he just never remembered him before. But yeah, Eric, yeah. And he didn't know what Eric's last name was. And he didn't know where Eric was from, or whether he was married, or whether he worked, or anything like that. But he'd known Eric, and Eric was really a good friend of his. And so, which, of course, makes no sense whatsoever. It's senseless. You can't have your best friend and not know his last name.
Right.
So we did a session on that, and we did various sessions. He got on fishing trips with this guy. They've been to restaurants. They've been visiting here and there. They've been in other countries together. This is not evidence. All these accounts from Bernard are not evidence unless somebody else begins to say the same thing without knowing about what Bernard was saying. And then somebody else did fairly quickly.
Really?
Then another person did, then another person, then another person, then another person, then another person, then another person.
Wow. And
I realized one person I worked with since 1993, I'd worked with for 10 years, and one person I worked with since 1987. And they began to tell me these stories about going places with hybrids and teaching them how to dress and this and that. And I knew this was the change. It was on us now. This is it.
Okay. A number of questions popped to mind. For example, if you were staring at a hybrid, would you know it?
No, you would not know it. And if you knew it, that person wouldn't be there.
Well, then that would suggest a more subtle merging of the species, if you want to put it that way, because they certainly look more human than they do anything else, right?
I call them hybrids. They are bred to look human, and not just human, but average human that will not stand out, that blends in, period. If they're too tall, not a chance of coming down here. If they got too big a nose, not going to happen. If their eyes are too big, nope. They have to look absolutely average.
Normal.
Now, here's the thing. All gray aliens and all hybrids and all hybrids and all other beings on board the object have one interesting trait. They can control people's minds neurologically and make them do or think or see anything that they want them to do or see or think or see. And we can't do that to them. That is an astoundingly huge difference.
It is.
It's a difference between species. It makes us a second-class species and them a first-class species. It's not like they're just kissing cousins who live off and somewhere else and they're coming to visit us and all the rest of that stuff. That's not what this is about. You got to remember, this is a global phenomenon. This goes around the world. It does not matter where a person is born or what their life was like or what their educational level is or what their intelligence level is or their geographic area or anything. They all say the same thing in terms of the abduction phenomenon.
All right. These are remarkable allegations you're making. Now, I've got a zillion questions. Hybrids. Okay, we'll call them that. Hybrids. Humans with the ability to control others' minds, are they aware of that ability?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because they rely on abductees to teach them how to live in society. They rely on them on board the object when they're young, and when they get ready to move into apartments, they rely on them to teach them how to furnish the apartment, to teach them how to go shopping, to teach them how to drive, to teach them about relationships, to teach them everything. And abductees do that, and then they forget immediately, just like an abduction, what has happened, and they're completely controlled. They can't say, "I'll be back in a minute. Just hang on there for a second," and then come out of a closet carrying a 9mm Glock. They can't do that. So
All right, that's a gigantic difference between human beings and hybrids, as you call them. Is there any other difference that you're aware of?
No. They are human, except their neurological abilities are impossible to imagine, and they are completely controlling of humans.
Well, that would make them essentially a master race.
You said it, I didn't.
I did. I'm not afraid to say it. If you have a group of people able to control the minds and the thoughts and even the visions of others, that is a super race.
Exactly right. I just don't see a wonderful, fulfilling phenomenon that is happening to us that we're begging to hurry up and come here. I just don't see that. It's not what people tell me. Okay, I'll take it. That's not what people tell me. I've run little experiments with people. I tell them, no, I don't want you to tell me anything bad. I don't want to hear anything bad. I don't want to hear anything that I don't like. You understand?
Professor, hold on.
Anything bad, I will say to them and do hypnosis,
right.
And they just couldn't care less.
Hold on, Professor, hold on. We've got a break. We'll be right back. This is Art Bell and Midnight.
And we're going to actually leave it there because it looks like for some reason we are having a little technological issues here at GC Central. And the only fault I want to have on the show is the show's fault and not our own. So we'll pick up more of the UFO and alien abductions tomorrow in part 2. As always, please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Get us those goals of 5,000 views and 1,000 subscribers. So Boxing Extras and YouTube, Google will pay attention, start setting us items. Until next time, of course, it is always a great new world to release the Krakens. Like, share, and subscribe. Come on back for another full day from day one.